Hey everybody, we're back in the kitchen. We're making some fun things. I think we're on about day 9 or 10 of this social distancing where we're just kind of stuck at home, or at least I have been. And all I've done is really eat. So I've been trying to think of some good recipes, and something I came up with was I was either going to make a lemon blueberry bunt or cinnamon rolls. And ultimately I went with cinnamon rolls. It's something I've been craving. And these are really good cinnamon rolls. They're not dry. They're really rich, almost, like a good king cake. That's what we're going with here. Not very bready-like, but just kind of cinnamon roll-like. So that's what we're going to be making today. By the way, if you do not have yeast, whether it be active or instant yeast, you're kind of SOL at this point, I think, because a lot of yeast is sold out across the country. I even called my mom over in our small town in Texas to go look at our little grocery store, and they were sold out of yeast. So I said, okay, nowhere's going to have yeast. Luckily, I had some in the pantry, and it's still active, so some good news there. Now, if you don't, well, we're just going to have to wait until we have some yeast to make these. But anyways, let's get to it. We're going to be making some delicious cinnamon rolls with a good glaze. So, of course, anytime you're making, breads, things like this, you need your yeast, right? Something to help the bread rise. So just an FYI, if you do not have yeast, whether it be active or instant at home, you're going to have a hard time finding it in the stores right now. Called, like I mentioned, my mom, and they do not even have yeast in the small town where I live. So yeast, very hard to come by. I did have some in my pantry. It's active yeast, meaning we have to actually activate it. So we're gonna do that. Now the first thing you need, the recipe calls for half a cup of milk. Now what you're gonna do is you're gonna use that, a quarter of a cup of that milk you'll need to help activate the yeast. So go ahead and get your bowl. You're gonna pour the warm milk. We put it in the microwave for about 20 seconds, depending on your microwave. You need it to be about 100 degrees. So you stick your finger in it, it doesn't burn you. You don't want it to, be scalding or anything like that. So pour the warm milk into your bowl. We're gonna give it a little bit of sugar. And keep in mind, this is for active yeast, not instant. You don't have to do any of this for instant yeast. A little bit of sugar, get that a little mix. And then we're gonna add our 2 1/4 teaspoons of yeast, which is 1 packet. Now this is the active yeast, so this is why I'm doing it. We have to activate it in order for it to activate. Now instant yeast, you don't have to do this. So we're gonna pour it on top of this milk and sugar. That's it, let it sit there. Now there's no guarantee that even if you have a brand new active pack of yeast, that it's going to be active, that it's going to be living. That's what we're trying to see here, is to make sure that it's living. And within about 5-10 minutes or so, it'll really start to bubble up. You'll know if it's alive, it'll look like it. If it's not alive, it won't do anything. And well, you aren't going to be able to do this if you don't have any yeast. So crossing my fingers that my yeast is living. I've had this yeast for a while. It's very possible that it's dead and it's not going to do anything. But we're just gonna have to wait and see at this point. Also, do not mix it in. You don't want to drown the yeast. Just let it sit there on top of the warm milk. Let it do its thing. And if it is good, it will eventually start to bubble up, and then we can go on with the recipe. So we're gonna let this sit here for a couple of minutes, 5-10 minutes actually, and then we'll be back, and hopefully we have a living yeast. All right, so while the yeast is hopefully doing its thing, we'll check back on in a minute. Let's go ahead and get all of our dry ingredients together that we're gonna eventually put on top of our yeast. So of course, the first thing, we need the flour. And for this recipe, we're going for about 3.5 cups. So about 420 grams roughly of the flour. And remember, scale is the best way to do it. If not, you've got to use a sifter. You've got to make sure your flour is not packed, because if you put in packed flour, it's going to mess up the whole recipe and you'll have too much flour. And that just doesn't work. Baking is about precision. So we add about 420 grams of flour, excuse me, which is about 3.5 cups, so quite a bit. A little too much. You just take it out if you put too much. Okay, oh, it's right on 420. Okay, so we've got our flour in there. We also need to just add our sugar, so we're doing, what are we doing? 1/4 cup of white and light brown sugar, so 2 sugars. And by the way, if you're out shopping, you'll notice that there's not a whole lot of, there's a lot of ingredients missing off the shelf if you have to go to the grocery store. So if you cannot find flour or regular sugar, I don't have a solution there for you. But if you can't find brown sugar, you can make it very easily. And this is just a little side note. I actually make my own brown sugar. It's very easy. All you need is regular white granulated sugar, molasses, this is the key, and you mix those two together and you get brown sugar. It's that easy. So here's what mine looks like. This is my light brown sugar. And to make it, you put your white sugar in the bowl, then you pour on some molasses. You just kind of eyeball it. Start with little, work your way up, and then you just pinch it in. And as you pinch it in, it'll eventually turn into regular brown sugar. And of course, the darker the sugar, brown sugar you want, the more molasses you have to add. So it's as easy as that. So if you cannot find brown sugar out there, I know a lot of it's missing off the shelves, go ahead and make your own. That's what I do. And it just adds that much more to the recipe itself. So we're gonna add the sugar to the mixture. We also are gonna add a tablespoon of sugar. Or salt, not sugar. Well, we already added the sugar. So tablespoon, or teaspoon rather, of some salt. You get all that together and just go ahead and let it sit there. You also are gonna add in your flavors, like your cinnamon, and if you want some other cinnamons, maybe you like allspice. I'm a big believer in allspice, so go ahead and add some of that if you want. I'm not gonna do this for this specific recipe. But go ahead and add in a teaspoon of cinnamon. Of course, this is the best part of the entire recipe, what makes the entire recipe. And then if you want some nutmeg, you can do some nutmeg as well, no matter how you do it. So do some nutmeg. Oh my gosh, that smells so good. Okay, so we've got our dry mixture together. Our yeast, our sponge that we're activating, it's coming together. I checked it, I think we're gonna be okay. We'll check back on it in a minute, but for now we've got our dry ingredients and we're gonna combine them and then we're gonna go from there. So I'm gonna go get our yeast, cross your fingers, cross your toes, whatever, that it is activated and good. As I mentioned, it's about 6 months old and it's really not supposed to last that long. So we'll be right back, let me go grab it. Wait, got a little ahead of myself. We've got to make the wet ingredients too. So to do this is kind of the key part to enriching that dough, making the dough really moist, non-bread-like. As I mentioned earlier, we want more of that like king cake, right? So whenever we have a good king cake that's moist, it's because it's super enriched. Whenever you have a king cake that's dry and bready, it's because it's not that enriched. So we're going for the enriched side, which is lots of fats, things like that. So we have a 1/4 cup of milk. So the recipe calls for 1/2 cup. We use the first 1/4 cup for the yeast activation. We're using the next 1/4 cup for the wet ingredients. So you've got a 1/4 cup of milk, 1/2 cup of, I use Greek yogurt. You can use as a substitute for sour cream or whatever. So we've got 1/2 cup of Greek yogurt. And then we also need to add a tablespoon of vanilla. So lots of vanilla in this, but that's what makes it so good. So add a tablespoon of some good vanilla or whatever vanilla you got. There's not a whole lot of options out there right now anyways. So we add that. And what we're actually going to do is we're going to kind of nuke this in the microwave, warm it up just a little bit so it doesn't shock our yeast and all that when we put it in. We'll put it at about 30 seconds maybe, and then we'll put it in our bowl, we'll add our egg, and then we will eventually add all this together. Okay, out of the microwave, what we just put in there for about 20-30 seconds, depends on your microwave of course. Go ahead, pour that in your bowl, and get all the good stuff out, like the sour, or the Greek yogurt or sour cream, whichever you're using. Now we're gonna add our egg, all right? So add your egg, 1 large egg, and remember, room temperature egg. We always bake with room temperature eggs here. And then we're just gonna whisk that together. Get all that Greek yogurt or sour cream kind of mixed up with the milk. But we're not done. We're continuing to enrich this. So now we add the really good stuff, butter, all right? Where's my butter? There it is. So for this, we're adding 6 tablespoons of really soft butter, because of course you want it to go in. So 6 tablespoons is 3/4 of a stick, if you're wondering. So add that in. You can chop it up so it goes in easier. I actually should have done that, so let me do that really quick. So once you get your butter mixed in there with all your other wet ingredients, now we can bring it all together. So let me get my yeast. I checked on it again, looking good. It's not the prettiest, but it's starting to activate. And then we'll get our dry ingredients and we'll throw it all together. We'll get our dough and then we'll go from there. We have all of our dry ingredients, we have our wet ingredients, and we have our yeast. By the way, the yeast looks like it activated, which is what we were scared of. So instant yeast is the best because you don't have to go through any of this. But if you don't, if you're like me, all you have was active yeast, you've got to activate it with that warm milk and a little bit of sugar. So it does look active. It's in our mixing bowl. Start with it in the mixing bowl, because then you just add to it and you put it on top of your sponge or your yeast. So before we do that, we've got our dry ingredients, our flour and all that kind of stuff. And we're gonna add this to on top of our yeast, our sponge, whatever you want to call it. So we add that on top. All right. Be gentle. You don't have to dump it all in there at once. You'll make a big mess. Now, once you get that in there, then add on top of your wet ingredients that we mixed together in another bowl. You might notice your butter's a little clumpy. That's okay. It'll eventually mix in. Just make sure it's super soft. You don't do cold butter here. So go ahead and pour your wet ingredients on top. Get all that butter. And remember, this is a really what we call enriched dough, which means, so when you're baking a bread, like a classic white loaf, wheat loaf, any bread, it's not really enriched, right? So it does not have eggs, or it doesn't have butter, it doesn't have milk, things like that make it rich. This is different. This is going to be enriched. It's not going to be dry at all. That's not what we want. So it is going to take some time, and it's going to come together a little bit different than a regular bread as well. So using your dough hook, we put it on down in there. Start slow. If you don't, you'll make the biggest mess in the world. And just kind of let it mix up. And we're going to wait for the dough to come together. And then once it starts to come together, then we'll bring it out of the bowl. We'll flour our surface. We'll start kneading it, and we'll get it to where we want it. And then it's got to rest for a while. So this is not a quick recipe. This is not something that takes 30 minutes unless you split it up into a couple days. So let this mix up. Come back. I'll show you what it needs to look like before we get it out. And then we'll put it on our counter. We'll knead it. And then we'll put it in a bowl to rise for a little bit, and then we'll go from there, and then eventually we'll have cinnamon rolls. Okay, we've had it in our mixer, we've mixed the dough up. It's now to this kind of tacky, sticky consistency. Not where we want it to be yet, but now we have to knead it. We have to put it on the counter, flour the counter, knead it, and get it to where we can put it in the bowl and let it rise for a little bit. So now here's the fun, messy part. But the important thing is, make sure your counter is clean before you put it on it. You do not want any weird crumbs or anything like that in your dough as you get it together. And of course, you need a lot of flour. So go ahead, make sure you flour your countertop, because this is a very sticky dough, and you don't want to stick into everything and becoming a big mess. So go ahead, flour, we'll get it out, we'll knead it, and we'll get it to where it needs to be. Okay, flour is on the counter. Grab your dough. As you can see here, it is a sticky mess. Go ahead and get as much as you can. Put it on the counter, mash it out. Kneading's really easy. All you do is fold, push away, turn it, fold, away, etc., etc. And you just do this until it comes together, until it kind of springs back. So that's what we're looking for with this being kneaded enough. All right, our dough has come together. Not bad. What we're looking for is that kind of springiness to it. So we put our finger in it, it springs back nicely. It's got that nice smooth look to it, which is what we're looking for. And that's about it with that. So now we need to get it in our oil bowl, and we're gonna let it rise in a warm spot. Okay, our dough is come together nicely. We've got it right here. See a cute little baby dough. Now we got to put it in our bowl. We got to let it proof. So the first thing you should do, if you don't have a proofing drawer or a warm place to put it, you just warm up your oven a little bit, just a little bit, and then you can put it in there. You can also warm up your microwave with a cup of water in there or something. Keep it nice and humid and warm in there as well. And then just kind of let it sit in there. Now this is going to take a while. It's an enriched dough, so we're expecting this to take probably a couple hours or so. So you're just going to have to check back until it about doubles in size. So first thing you got to do, oil. Put a little oil in your bowl, because if you don't, it'll stick to the bowl. So just go ahead and oil it. This does not take any skill or precision. Just put some oil in there, mix it around, rub it around the edges. Okay, once you get the bowl oiled, get your cute little baby dough that's gonna grow into a big dough. Put it in there. Also, put a little oil on top of it. By the way, I'm just using vegetable oil. It works for this. All right, now we've got our cute little dough. Baby dough is what we're calling it in there. And let it sit. So also, notice where it's at. I'm gonna look at it, I'd say, okay, it's about here on the bowl. I want it to double, so a couple of hours is probably what it's gonna take. We've got a damp towel that we're gonna put on top of it. And it's just gonna sit here like this. And I'm gonna put it in the oven that is warm, not hot. You don't wanna cook this. But put it in there, it is warm. We're gonna let it sit in there for a couple of hours. Come back and check it in a couple of hours, make sure it has risen nicely. Cross our fingers if that yeast is still good. Now we've got to make our filling for the cinnamon rolls. So this is pretty easy actually. All you're gonna do is 3 tablespoons of white sugar, and this all goes into a mixing bowl. And then 3 tablespoons of your light brown sugar. Now, this does not have to be perfect, but you want it about you want the measurements about what they're supposed to be. And then about a tablespoon of cinnamon. A lot of cinnamon in this recipe. Cinnamon rolls. Put that in there, and then this is this is just gonna mix together in your bowl. And you're gonna get this. Oh my gosh, it smells so good. Your classic kind of filling for your cinnamon roll. And then eventually, once the dough is complete, we'll come back, we'll put some butter, some soft butter on the dough after we roll it out, and then we'll put this on top, and then we'll go from there. The dough out of the oven, it's been about 2.5 to 3 hours, quite a while, and it does take a while. We're gonna punch it down just to get a little bit of the air bubbles out, and then we've already floured our surface here. And this is where you get into the fun stuff, where you get to roll it out and put all the things into it and actually form your cinnamon roll. So of course, now you've got your dough, we're gonna put a little flour on it, get it ready to roll out. Don't forget, you gotta flour your roller. And we're just gonna get it pressed out and into a rectangle. Okay, now we've got it completely laid out. It's not a perfect rectangle, but it is the gist of what we're going for here. It's thin, it's not too thin, but it's also not too thick. So now we're gonna take about half a stick of very soft butter. This butter has been sitting out a while. Notice how easily it spreads. So you're gonna put a thin layer of butter onto this, and then this is what all the sugar and salt, sugar and cinnamon is gonna adhere to. Now we've got all of our butter on it. It's not the thickest layer, and like I said, you really just need it so you can put your cinnamon and sugar mixture on it. So we've got our brown sugar, white sugar, and cinnamon, and all you're gonna do now is sprinkle this all over the entire thing. And it's gonna seem like you're putting too much, but I promise you're going to use every bit of this that you made. Okay, now we've got a nice topping of the cinnamon sugar mixture. Now here's a thing that's optional, but it's something I love. It is pecans in the cinnamon roll itself. So what I've done is I've bought pecans, I've beaten them with the roller and smashed them all up, and now I'm gonna add these little chopped up or really mashed pecans across the dough as well. So they'll be baked inside of the cinnamon roll itself. Now we've got a nice topping of pecans, and this is where we get to roll it up. Now rolling it up, there is a method to it. What we're going for here is we want it to be tight, and that's really the main part of it, is you want it to be very, very tight. Now here's where I messed up. What I should have done is I should have turned it this way. So right now the rectangle is a long ways this way. We want it to be this way. That way you can roll it that direction or to you instead of going across, because that's going to make it a little bit more difficult. But anyways, we'll do our best here. And as I mentioned, it's important that you start tight. So you're going to create your first little roll here and make it tight. Press it down in there. And then keep it tight as you do it. All right, now we've got our nice roll. We're gonna cut it up. You can either use a knife or dental floss that's not flavored. That's the best way to do it. Unfortunately, I'm out right now, so I'm just gonna have to use a very sharp knife. So you're first gonna cut off the end of the cinnamon roll, because it's messy. We really don't need it at this point. Now you're gonna cut it into 9 pieces. So I'm using an 8x8 pan, which would fit about 3x3 on each side, or 3x3, so 9 cinnamon rolls in total. So. There they are. Now we need to put them in a pan. So what I'm gonna use, as I said, is an 8x8 pan. Of course, we want to butter it. Just regular, good old soft butter. Put some butter on the bottom. So there we go. Sliding around. But see how there's a little space in between them? They're not cramped in there, because these still have to rise again, believe it or not. We're not done, and that's why this recipe is something that you could do this the day before, and at this point you could seal these off really nicely and then put them in the fridge and then bring them out in the morning and let them rise a little bit. So we're gonna let these rise for about another hour or so to kind of fill out, and then we'll throw them in the oven. They'll bake them, we'll make our glaze, and then they'll be done. Okay, the cinnamon rolls have been proofing for about 1.5 to 2 hours, so an additional time that it takes for them to rise once you put them in the pan. This is what they turned out. They poofed on up, so now we can preheat the oven to 350, get it warmed up. We'll throw them in there for about 25 to 30 minutes, just keep a close eye on them. And while that's working, or while that's cooking, we'll go ahead and create our glaze that's gonna go on top. We're to our final thing we have to make before we can enjoy these cinnamon rolls. They're in the oven, so we're gonna go ahead and make our glaze that's gonna go on it. Pretty simple. First, you're just gonna start with 2 tablespoons of butter. So that's about quarter of a stick of butter. And make sure it's pretty soft as well. Throw that in your bowl. Then you're gonna do 4 ounces of your cream cheese, and that's, if you buy a normal size cream cheese, that's half of the block. Put that in there. And then we're gonna add some vanilla, more vanilla. That's gonna be 1 teaspoon of your vanilla. And then also you wanna add a little bit of lemon juice. I swear anytime I've ever had a good icing, especially on some king cakes here in town, I've noticed a little hint of lemon, so I swear they put a little lemon juice in their icing that they use. I think that's one of the secrets. A little bit of salt, just a little bit, not much. And then of course you've got to add some milk as well. Now we're going to use about a teaspoon. We'll start with about, a teaspoon of milk. And then how much milk you use is just kind of what consistency you want. And then behind that, we're going to add in our powdered sugar. Between 100 and 200 grams, so a little over a cup probably. Remember, you got to sift it. You got to get the hard knots out of the powdered sugar. So mix this very slowly. If you do it fast, you'll have powdered sugar all over the kitchen. And we're just going to watch the consistency of it, and then we'll add more milk as we go to get it to where we want it to be. And depending if you like thick icing on your cinnamon rolls, of course you'll have a thick one. If you like it more runny, then you can put a little bit more milk in. But you just have to watch it. Okay, perfect. So I got mine to where I like it. I like mine with a little bit more milk, so I probably went a little over a tablespoon and a half or so to get it to the consistency I wanted it to be. So this is the final thing we do before we wait on the cinnamon rolls to bake. We're still got a little bit longer on those, and then when they come out, we'll put some icing on it. We'll probably let it cool, and then when we serve it, we'll put a little bit more icing on it. There they are. They've been in the oven about 30 to 32 minutes, just depending. You kind of have to watch the outsides to make sure it doesn't get overcooked, but overall looks good. See, the pecans have kind of pushed out as well. So now is the good part. We're gonna add our cream cheese frosting to the top of these. They're still very hot, so this is a great time to add them. And we're just gonna pour it over the top. All right, guys, we have finished them. They are complete. We'll go ahead and cut one out here in just a little bit, and we came a long ways because I did not think the yeast was gonna work. Surprisingly, it ended up working, so hopefully you have some yeast, and if you do, I hope you can make these and you can enjoy them. And everyone continue to be safe, continue to practice your social distancing. Of course, we will get through this, but in the meantime, enjoy your cinnamon rolls. My next recipe, by the way, I'm gonna be making that lemon blueberry bundt cake. So stick around for that. That'll probably be within the next week or so. Thanks everyone so much for tuning in and watching this video.